are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. Downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Bernie Sanders ekes out a win. Elizabeth Warren fades. And Biden tanks.
Hell yeah.
Meanwhile, the entire federal prosecuting team, Roger Stone, resigns in the wake of Bill Barr overruling their sentencing recommendation. Meanwhile, Democrats in the Senate demand an investigation into Barr's handling, as it were. And polls show Sanders now leading with non-white voters and gained 10 points with black voters since Iowa. As Trump's revenge rages on, a Treasury Secretary nominee is withdrawn. Speaking of raging on, coronavirus may be transmittable through bathroom pipes. Trump also now seeking military discipline against Colonel Vindman. The Culinary Union in Nevada hits Sanders on Medicare for All. Mike Bloomberg, still awful, and I don't know if he's getting awfuler. We just replaying the greatest hits. Republicans seize the light on healthcare when they get sick. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of sick, I'm feeling a little under the weather. Everybody here is pretty exhausted. We may, hopefully, do a shorter show than normal today. But you know how that usually works out. We usually end up going 20 minutes longer than the average show.
You don't think water should be regulated? Oh, pray tell for 45 minutes. It's only 2:15.
Well, there's a very good chance that might happen.
I think you're confusing freedom. Oh, my God. Thank you.
To help with connectivity.
We were just about to stop the show. Now I'd like to give you 50 minutes.
Exactly. That is not, that's conceivable. I don't know what else to tell you. That's conceivable. But we will go through the New Hampshire primary results. Just a reminder, on Wednesday, February 19th, that is a week from today, there will be a debate in Nevada. We will be on vacation. However, I am going to endeavor to do some debate coverage from a remote location. So we'll see. And the Nevada primary, or I should say caucus, is on the 22nd, which is, of course, let's see, Thursday's the 20th, Friday's the 21st. It's on a Saturday. So that'll be good, at least to get a little bit more of an attendance, or at least an opportunity for an attendance. We will talk about this interesting dynamic with the Culinary Union. We've been talking about this for a while. We got a phone call about a week ago, or 2 days ago, or 15 minutes ago. I can't tell anymore. But from someone who I believe was either in the Culinary the Union or was, and also their brother-in-law or their sister-in-law was as well. And he let us know that they were beginning to promote the idea that Sanders was going to destroy their health care. And we will talk about that. Apparently, that has gone now live, and we have a flyer that is both in English and Spanish.
There was somebody at Michael's live show who worked for a union that said there was like some Red Scare vibes about Medicare for All in the one he was working with too.
I mean, in particularly in Nevada, the Culinary Union is huge, and huge both in terms of size. I think there's some 150,000 members, and I mean, because obviously it's Vegas, and they're a huge force. So we shall see how that shakes out.
I've heard some, at least Chuck Rocha is saying pretty publicly, like, we're gonna go. I mean, it's what you'd expect them to say, but they're gonna go directly to rank and file union members. And I've seen some interesting. This might be very revealing about what's happening in unions right now, because there's some perception I've seen like in terms of pushback, which is like, it's not exactly like rank and file union members are incredibly excited about what their sort of underperforming leadership has to say. On the other hand, I mean, loss aversion is loss aversion, and people who are already hounded and terrorized in general by politics might be scared of and risk averse, which makes sense. But
some people are scared and risk averse. Other people just like having something that other people don't have, unfortunately.
I think with the Culinary Workers Union, it would be more risk averse, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research shows that people are more afraid of losing something that they have than
the
not
Danny
getting
Ariely thing, right?
Yeah,
I think he was he was an Israeli behavioral economist.
All right, well, let's go into this. Just find that, Matt, as we go. Here is what is this? This one is which one is this video? Okay, yeah. Now, there's a lot of stuff coming out about Mike Bloomberg, and we're going to get into some of it today, because Mike Bloomberg has been basically living in what is, I consider, a parallel universe in terms of this campaign. I don't think there's ever been, at least in my recollection, in modern era, and, you know, primaries are really modern era creatures, where you have a situation where a candidate has been in no debates, participates in none of the primaries or caucuses, the first four, waits till Super Tuesday to jump in, and then also, well, maybe Ross Perot was around there, but he was not in a primary, but also is polling like Michael Bloomberg is. And I think that if you've ever, if you could ever say that something was a bubble, this is a bubble, because he has been inflating his numbers by going on air and presenting himself like a commodity, a Snickers bar, right? I mean, you just have the opportunity to go out and advertise all the attributes of a Snickers bar. There's peanuts, there's caramel, there's chocolate. Oh, that sounds good. What you don't have is someone else standing by going like, oh, and that's also, 300 calories and for 1/4 of the bar. And the caramel is made in a plant somewhere where it's completely tainted. I'm not talking about specifically about any type of brand of candy bar. Just so I don't want to be, I don't know what I'm not maligning any candy. I'm saying generally, not Snickers. I'm saying Snickers. Let's call it a different bar or whatever it is.
Ironic analogy considering Bloomberg's crusade against sugar.
Indeed. But
candy should have debates.
Exactly. But the idea being that he's out there selling himself without any critique, without any pushback at this point, because A, he hasn't been in the debates, and B, nobody's taking him that seriously as of yet. However, as a public service to you, we're going to remind you why we have been mocking Michael Bloomberg here since his tenure as mayor in the later years. Here is Michael Bloomberg at, I don't know, the International Monetary Fund. Is that really what it is? Or did we just put that behind him because we wanted it to really make the point of how much of an oligarch he is? Here he is at he's got a one-on-one with Lagarde. She's former, right, head of. She's still ongoing head of the International Monetary Fund, and I happen to be in favor of the.
Sorry, I believe she's at the European Central Bank now.
Okay. I happen to be in favor of some of the policies that were instituted under the Bloomberg administration regarding taxation and food. For instance, trans fats were outlawed. Those are plastics that were literally, you would eat them. They were sort of edible plastics, I guess, in the same way that really anything you can digest and actually ingest, I should say, is edible. Those were outlawed. He raised the taxes on cigarettes to where it became prohibitive for most people to smoke. He raised the taxation on sugary drinks and capped, I think, the size of slushies. Now, these policies on some level are regressive until these products simply don't exist and people switch to other products. So where people go from sodas to water, let's say, or to juice, or to, tea. And until people stop smoking cigarettes, in which case it's not regressive anymore. But they are somewhat regressive policies. However, there's also a lot of externalities that the rest of us bear with things like drinks that are just sugar transport vehicles that create, epidemic of diabetes.
Oh, you're making Matt thirsty.
Yeah, I'm sure. And however, what is really telling about Mike Bloomberg, just like he did with stop and frisk, and we will go through some of those quotes and numbers as well. He does not see this policy in that regard. He sees the little people as little people. He honestly talks about human beings as if he is a god. They are not even a different class of human being to him. They are literally a different species that he just oversees in some fashion.
Explain SimCity.
It really is. Here he is talking about those sugary drinks.
Some people say, well, taxes are regressive, but in this case, yes, they are. That's the good thing about them, because the problem is in people that don't have a lot of money. And so higher taxes should have a bigger impact on their behavior and how they deal with themselves. So I listen to people saying, oh, we don't want to tax the poor. Well, we want the poor to live longer so that they can get an education and enjoy life. And that's why you do want to do exactly what a lot of people say you don't want to do. The question is, do you want to pander to those people, or do you want to get them to live longer? And there's just no question. If you raise taxes on full sugary drinks, for example, they will drink less. And there's just no question that full sugar drinks are one of the major contributors to obesity, and obesity is one of the major contributors to heart disease and cancer and a variety of other things. So it's like saying, I don't want to stop using coal because coal miners will go out of work. Well, will lose their jobs. We have a lot of soldiers in the United States, in the U.S. Army, but we don't want to go start a war just to give them something to do. And that's exactly what you're saying when you say, well, let's keep coal killing people because we don't want coal miners to lose their jobs. The truth of the matter is there aren't very many coal miners left anyways.
All right, well, listen, he's getting a little bit off the topic. But first off, just going backwards to forward, in fact, I think we are highly incentivized to go to war because it just so happens that we do that all the time. I think for his buddies to make a lot of money in the military-industrial complex. But here's the point. He almost gets there with the coal miners. He almost gets there as to what is missing from his calculation. First off, the idea that we want them to live longer so they get a better education and enjoy life. I'm all for people being lifelong students. But the idea that at the end of their lives, you have a significant number of people going out and getting an education at that point doesn't make any sense. They could get an education in their 20s or in their teens.
No.
And this is the weird, creepy thing as he talks about this. When you look at the plans to get this country off of coal that are presented, they always involved something to the effect of, we need to retrain coal miners. We need to provide for them. The Green New Deal says we'll retrain you. And if you don't feel like you can be retrained and find another job at age 50 or some odd, then we'll pay you to not be coal miners. So it is a human-centric policy. If Mike Bloomberg had the same perspective and was genuinely concerned, I mean, look, I get that you say that it's a burden on the system to have this many people with diabetes. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say. But if you genuinely had the concern that he pretends he has about wanting poor people to live longer lives, maybe not, as opposed to I would need people to come and clean my offices.
So bring me my big gay ice cream.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Then what he was in the position of doing is we're going to do a special type of nutritional enterprise zones where bodegas that have X amount of fresh fruit or fresh produce will get a tax abatement. I mean, they do tax abatements all the time. We're living in the middle of a massive tax abatement for property taxes around here. And I got news for you. I'm looking out the window. They don't need it. They're getting apartments. They're renting apartments for $5,000 for a studio apartment or something. And they're getting tax abatements. This happens. There's a lot of things that he could do.
Maybe some well-funded community health clinics.
Health clinics, nutritional support. I mean, if that's what he's on with the sugary stuff.
I mean, the biggest predictor of life expectancy is someone's income, so maybe attack economic inequality.
There's a whole host of other things he could do.
Well, and not only did he not do those, Matt Karp did a great headshot where Bloomberg wrote a column a couple weeks ago saying part of basically I'm running to take on income inequality, and he did a double head, and the other one was OJ seeks out the real killer.
Right.
And I think the others, but it's really important because this reminds me of Macron in the sense that not only did Bloomberg not do all of these other things, or even just use his national leadership to talk about agriculture subsidies and protecting family farms or advocating for some form of universal health care, right? Like even if it's not going to be single payer, something that would have been constructive. What they do with these policies on climate and health, because they're so classist and punitive, is they undermine broader public support for things we really urgently need to tackle. And I think, Trump and Bloomberg is that's a classic choice because Trump will just say he's going to take away your guns, going to take away your soda, and he doesn't trust you to live your life. And it'll be an effective message.
Plus, I was heavily invested in Arizona iced tea.
Right.
Who knows?
I'm sure if you go through the portfolio,
wouldn't be hard to find.
Yeah.
Folks, as you know, if you're anything like me and you're very busy, it's hard to find the time to sit down and read because you have your child and both your children. They come over and they say, Dad, what are you doing? It looks like you're enjoying yourself or you're taking a couple of minutes for yourself. We need to end that right now. Fortunately, there's an incredible app called Blinkist. It's going to be your new secret weapon for learning new things and getting ahead in life and just expanding your horizons. And you can do it quick enough without your kids realizing that you're actually learning something or engaging in something other than their whim at the moment. Blinkist takes the best key takeaways, the need-to-know information, the top lines, if you will, folks, the bullet points from thousands of nonfiction books, condenses them down in just 15 minutes. You can listen to it or you can read it. And you can do it on your phone. You can do it on your tablet, your iPad, your web browser, whatever it is. Blinkist is made for busy people who want to get to the main points of a book quickly. They make it easy to find a book during your commute, to read a book, or to hear a book, I should say, or to get through the whole thing on the course of your commute, on your lunch break, while you've locked yourself in the bathroom and told your kids you're in the middle of something, whatever it is, just to get away from them. I love it. And I've mentioned this before. There are books that. There's a lot of books that I'm like, I'm not going to invest this much time to read that. But there's still like a little nagging something pulling at me like, well, maybe I should try and just figure out what's in this. Like entrepreneurial books or how to be more polite or there's some, I'm not going to name names, but there's some nonfiction books that I'm like, I'm not going to read that book. I don't like that person or I don't like their perspective. But then at the same time, I'm like, I should know, though. I should know what they're writing. And that's what this Blinkist is really great for me. Your mileage may vary in some way, but you will find a reason why this is really indispensable. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or to listen to what is like a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. And you do this all for one low price. For a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You try it for 7 days and for free. And then with your new subscription, you get 25% off. That's Blinkist, BLINKIST.com/Majority Report. Start your 7-day free trial, save 25%. I mentioned before how I checked out like the 4-hour work week, but
each time you mention that book, your amount of hours you put in a week goes up.
Every time I mention,
yeah, you need to Blinkist that book again.
There is, I do actually, and that's the beauty of it. I can get a refresher. There's a couple like this American Carnage by Tim Alberta. It is about the Republican Civil War and the rise of President Trump. This is the type of book I would read just to sort of like base my understanding of what happened against this, but I'm not going to invest my whole time in it. And I'll get it in 15 minutes. You can check that out. There's a ton of others. You can sign up now at Blinkist.com/Majority Report. That's Blinkist.com/Majority Report. All right, let's get back a little bit to Mike Bloomberg, and then, we'll get to Mike Bloomberg in a bit. Let's do the recap.
Do we need to talk about my proposal to jail every single black male born in the United States at birth for their own good until they're 40, and then they'll be let out for an internship program at Bloomberg?
We will.
No one
get
ever
to
looks
that.
at the long-term plans. But look, I understand as of 6 months ago that was a mistake.
All right, we will. Exactly. My advisors told me as soon as I ran that it was a mistake, and I agreed with them. So last night, the New Hampshire primary took place. Bernie Sanders won, but he did not win by much. He got and this is with just about 95% reporting. I don't know if we have the full 100% yet. Where are we at? Is that, let's see, 2 minutes ago, we were at 294, so 98% reporting. Okay, so what we have is Bernie Sanders came in first with almost 26% of the vote, 25.7%. That got him 9 pledged delegates. Pete Buttigieg had about 3,500 less votes. So Sanders had 75,000, almost 76,000. Buttigieg had a little more than 72,000 votes.
God damn it. Who are all these people voting for that little rat bastard?
He got 24.4% of the vote. He got 9 delegates. Then in what was by all accounts a surprise, although I credit where credit's due, Virgil Texas yesterday predicted Amy Klobuchar. I don't think she did a little bit better than he thought she would, but he did predict her to become in third. He wasn't sure. He thought she'd be more on the cusp of qualifying for delegates. That would have been 15%. She ended up with almost 20% at 19.8%. She got 6 delegates.
I feel like New Hampshire is the perfect state for Amy Klobuchar.
I mean,
I think
gotta be
she's
tough.
a very strong candidate for New Hampshire. We'll
I
see.
did see more Amy signs than Warren signs when I was driving around.
she got more than twice the vote, and but nobody. I mean, nobody was predicting this even a week ago.
Not this margin, but if you told me, I mean, I should have put this out. I think
Probably.
third. You didn't think that she would get third place in New Hampshire? No, honestly,
I did
you
not.
really thought that was such a unique prediction?
I certainly wouldn't have thought that. Certainly not before the debate, and even after the debate, I didn't think that she would get third place. No,
I definitely
By
didn't think
20 by
20,
doubling?
but
No.
not by 20. But I thought she would be clustered with Warren and probably ahead.
Warren came in fourth with 9%. That netted her no delegates. Joe Biden came in fifth. Joe Biden got 30. Oh, wait. Yeah, will you put that down? What is that? What's that? That's Joe Biden got 24,000 votes with 8.5%, 0 delegates. In fact, others did better than Joe Biden. But, I mean, I guess that's a bunch of people. We lost 2 candidates last night. Andrew Yang dropped out of the race, as did Michael Bennett. Deval Patrick still hanging in there. He had 0.4% of the vote last night. Tulsi Gabbard got 3.3% of the vote. Tom Steyer, 3.6% of the vote. Just scroll down. I think there was Joe Sestak still doing all right. Kamala Harris.
I thought Sestak dropped out a while
ago. He did. And so did John Delaney. So did Julian Castro and Bullock. And all those other people. I mean, there's a lot of people who got some write-ins. I did not get any, apparently, which is a little disturbing. But that's okay.
Go for Bernie.
I mean, the fact is that Bernie Sanders underperformed. I think he, relative to the final polling, I think he underperformed a bit. I think he underperformed insofar as the standards in which we have been, or at least I have been, assessing his candidacy, in that he is supposedly bringing out new voters who are low propensity voters, who, by definition of being low propensity, would be less likely to be polled or considered in the polls as a likely voter. Nevertheless, the flatness of this race, the parity that exists, and because Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar have not literally, but about as close as you can get to literally no support in the African-American community, maybe a little bit more, but not much more in the Latino community. Now, that could change. I feel like it could particularly change in Klobuchar's instance for the time being. But I don't think it's going to change dramatically. So it really is tough to predict what's going to happen at this point. I would imagine that Joe Biden is out of the race by the time we get to Super Tuesday. Elizabeth Warren, I think she's going to wait to see how she does in Nevada. We will talk a little bit about that in a bit, because certainly the Culinary Union went at Sanders much harder than Warren, although they credit both of them with supporting Medicare for all. They are more concerned about Sanders, it seems like. But we will get to that in a bit. Sanders dominated in the youth vote. The turnout numbers were higher than 2008, or at least comparable. However, I don't know how that rates with the increase in population. And, it has been 12 years. One would anticipate a higher population, particularly in a state like New Hampshire, where one gets the sense that more people are pouring into the state.
Well, you really know how to suck the joy out of a victory, Sam.
Well, I mean, I think people should be happy about it, but I don't think anybody should be overly confident by any stretch. There's going to have to be a lot of work to do. Bernie Sanders is going to have to win in Nevada. If Bernie Sanders does not win in Nevada, and do quite well in South Carolina. It's going to make Super Tuesday even that much more tenuous.
It's like calibrating the message, because Bernie supporters can't be, naive, and there's a lot that needs to be done, and the margins need to be bigger. And then at the same time, of course, we have to push back against the corporate press that is going to literally pretend he didn't actually win.
Yeah,
that's the sort of dual track we have to figure out.
I mean, it turned out about how I thought it would when I was like, oh, I'm watching what's happening in Iowa. It seems pretty messed up. And, the polls were looking good for New Hampshire, but you can't take anything for granted. And I went and I brought 3 people with me because I was like, every vote counts in this primary. And it turns out we were right.
Yep.
Did you see what I just sent you for later, too?
Right. Talking about Bloomberg's.
We want Biden to stay in, folks.
And
well, yes. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the longer folks like Buttigieg and Klobuchar, and I'm convinced even Warren and Biden stay in, the stronger the chances are for Sanders. I'm not convinced that Warren's support, as everybody else is, that those 9 points that she got in New Hampshire, if she hadn't already bled those off to Bernie Sanders.
However, did you look at those numbers in the Politico piece? Her vote is coming from people who self-identify as liberal. She did terribly with moderates and conservatives. So the extent it's a genuine ideological thing, it would go to Sanders.
It's quite conceivable. And so, nevertheless, the idea here is to have as many of the not Sanders candidates in the race, splitting the race, and each one you would want to have an opportunity to pick up the delegates and deny their compatriots the delegates. So we'll see. But all this is going to come down. We're going to go through Nevada. I would anticipate Sanders placing in the top 2 in Nevada. I would anticipate him placing in the top 2 or 3 in South Carolina. And then it's on to Super Tuesday, where, we're still too far out to have a sense of this. Race changing quite considerably.
And you know what else? He needs to win by enough that the DNC can't pull any funny business at the convention.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know what that means, really, but things
that are allowed based on the rules, and possibly things that are not allowed based on the rules.
Right.
I just want to say that's why I would. I mean, first of all, this is another ridiculous media bias. Bernie said 1 million times he'll support the nominee. I want to start asking the other candidates: will you support the vote lead? Will you support the person who has the most votes, regardless of what the rules are? Mm-hmm. That's what I want to have the other candidates asked.
Yeah, I mean, the way the convention works is after the first round, it's sort of not unlike the delegate, like the Iowa.
No, I understand that, but I think we need to go whatever the technicalities are. I would be willing. We need to say, will you support who the vote lead is? That's what I think, regardless of what the rules are. One person, one vote determines the nomination.
But how do you look back on the race in 2016? At one point, right, Hillary Clinton, because she had 4 million more votes than Sanders did. At one point, probably in early spring, there was just simply not enough votes out there for him ever to have achieved more votes than her.
Sure.
And so,
what does this have to do with what I'm saying?
Well, that would argue then he should have dropped out at that point, because based upon the principle.
Sure, I don't, and that's let me first of all say I don't think that that's relevant, because we're talking about now. But I will say, if you want to go back into the future, but I mean, if you want to go into the past, I mean, I didn't say please drop out Bernie, but some people were trying to get super delegates to flip for him. I never said that they should do that. I think even though the thumbs were on the scales for her, and that matters, one of the big things about the legitimacy of 2016 is that she amassed more votes than him. And as much as I loathe her, and as much as I thought that was a mistake, that was the bottom line. You better believe if Bernie Sanders had one more vote than she did in 2016, I would have been there protesting.
Of course.
So to me, it's about the actual legitimacy, and I actually think one person, one vote is the legitimacy, and that is actually part of the reason in 2016 that I didn't and Matt didn't go along with some of the Bernie arguments, because at the end of the day, for all of the BS, she had 4 million more votes. I think that matters.
And if we trust these delegates to okay, maybe they can make the decision for themselves and not pick Bernie because they think the people that put them in that position want them to pick Klobuchar or whatever, right? Well, then let's hear that. Let's elaborate that for the people who are going to continue to vote for you in these primaries, and let's hear that. I'm interested to hear their rationale for that.
Wait, say again?
Like, if you are going to go for a candidate that isn't Bernie, go against the votes, because I think Bernie will have the most votes when all this is said and done.
I would imagine at this point, I mean, it looks like it, but assuming yes.
So if you want to support one of the candidates that isn't Bernie, basically, I want to hear the rationale for why you want to do that. And if it's because you think your supporters would want you to not throw your support behind Bernie, they should know that that's the assumption you're operating under as a candidate.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that, when you're talking like Buttigieg and Klobuchar and Biden, to a large extent, a lot of them are voting against, in some fashion, Bernie. But I guess, if you're saying that Buttigieg should come out now and say that if I get to the,
I think it becomes more relevant as Bernie racks up the votes.
And you see,
we want to make sure that they're not voting against their own constituents when you look at who the superdelegates are supporting.
Well, forget the superdelegates for a moment, because I don't think, that's a separate question.
David Plouffe said the other day, if we go against, I believe it was either the delegate lead or the popular vote lead, that will cause irreparable damage to the party. And I agree.
The superdelegates.
My understanding was any scenario, including superdelegates, where the person who goes into the convention leading does not become the nominee, that's going to be a serious problem.
I think that's true.
But
there's a very big difference in my mind between, let's say you go into the convention and Pete Buttigieg has, 100,000 less votes than Bernie Sanders. And Amy Klobuchar comes in with 1 million less or 2 million less votes than Bernie Sanders. But Klobuchar throws her delegates to Pete Buttigieg. 100,000 difference. That's different in my mind than the superdelegates coming in and changing the outcome of the vote.
Supporting superdelegates. That is absolutely an escalation, of course.
Right.
That's a whole other level.
But in the scenario I'm talking about, forget the superdelegates for a moment. In terms of Amy Klobuchar,
I'm holding the position that the person with the vote and delegate lead should be the nominee, period. And that all candidates should commit to that course of action. And I feel totally comfortable with that, regardless of the technicalities. And the clear difference.
It's not technicality. It's
the
rules
whatever.
that have always been.
Democracy
part of it.
on the level that most people understand democracy.
That's what
except for what we have with Electoral College,
which we have all opposed to, I thought.
Yeah,
if we're going, I'm going by my metric. If you just want to know my metric, is that in 2016, the reason that I wouldn't, I already said this, I wouldn't ride that hard on certain things because Hillary Clinton actually did have 4 million more votes. If Bernie Sanders comes in with 5,000 more votes, he should be the nominee, period. And frankly, I would,
Yeah, ask everyone if they'll commit to that. And if they won't, say why not.
They'll say, because I'm committing to the rules that when I entered the campaign that were explicit.
Okay.
Yeah,
go sell that to the country.
We think that's garbage.
I'm just, that's what I would say.
People will think that is garbage.
Yeah, that won't resonate
That
with
the rules
people.
say I can throw my support behind Buttigieg instead of Bernie?
Of course.
Yeah, but that's not that interesting. I want to hear them say that.
Right.
Yeah,
and also that won't resonate.
I think they could say,
people,
I mean,
though.
if you say, what would be your justification for giving your delegates to the second place finisher in the second round of voting? You would say, well, that's what the whole convention's for.
But what about them that do you like that overrides Bernie's lead in votes?
You could say I think that Pete Buttigieg has a better chance of winning. And that's what the convention, that's the rules of the convention that were stated when we all entered into this campaign. Everybody knew them. They were explicit. Everybody who voted, certainly if they took the time to learn, it's not like these.
Well,
then
we
I would
know
ask
that
to
the
see
voters
some
don't
polls.
do the time to do that. So
So I could just say
I would
there's
ask
no
them to
way
prove
in
it.
the summer that I'm going to be making arguments like this. I'm going to be
Well, I know.
arguing,
I'm just.
sure. No, I know that they'll say that. I don't think those things will particularly resonate with people. And I also would say, too, that in terms of reality, if you actually do that, Bernie or bust will become a real thing. And it will actually be pretty disastrous.
I agree with all that. And I think, I would be shocked if there wasn't, particularly if the vote count was, obviously larger. I mean, if it's, you're talking a couple thousand votes, it's unlikely that it would even be remotely that close. But I think that is it seems to me that's a perfectly rational thing for them to say. Now, I think people have to assess when they get in there if that's going to actually lead to a victory. I suspect that it would not. I think that you'd end up, fracturing the party and people would be pissed.
And then that gets to the other part of the question, which is what is the difference inside the party and within these people, frankly, between people who are well to the right and don't like Bernie and everything, but really do want to defeat Trump. And I think a chunk of people who are absolutely comfortable, they would certainly prefer to see Trump return to power than Bernie get anywhere near power. And that's the other,
I think there are also, though, people who legitimately feel that Bernie Sanders is going to lose 40 states.
Well, once we get to the point, though, where it becomes very clear that if they do that, they will lose by 40 states for sure because of how many people they're pissing off. That, then we'll see. Like James Carville, I actually take it as word that at the end of the day will support Bernie Sanders because he opposed Donald Trump for all he's running his mouth. Someone like Hillary Clinton, I think in the privacy of the ballot would pick Donald Trump over Bernie Sanders.
Absolutely.
So that's the distinction I'm drawing. And I think that, there's definitely people who think to themselves, absolutely, I'd prefer Bernie Sanders to lose to Donald Trump or to alienate those people because my contracts won't get affected and I can actually spin him losing in a way that will prop my own career. And I think there's other people who are totally freaked out and at the end of the day do want to remove Trump and they'll support Bernie.
I think the most important takeaway here is we cannot get discouraged. We need to stay focused right now. If Bernie doesn't have enough delegates to win it outright, they're going to try some stuff at the convention. We cannot trust these other candidates to support the person with the most votes. Like you said, they'll have lots of arguments for why it's a fine thing to do to support the candidate with the second most votes or whatever. We need to win by enough so that this stuff cannot happen. And the way to do that right now is to keep on knocking on people's doors, sending texts, showing up, and not throwing up your hands and saying, oh, well, it's not fair. He can't win. It doesn't matter.
100%.
Right.
Also threatening people on Twitter.
That's
a fucking
what they
good
want
point.
you to do.
Exactly.
Get in their mentions. Stay relentless.
Oh, God. Did you guys see that SNL this past week where they portrayed Bernie as just like the head of a troll army?
What is...
No.
Just
It's
a couple
really
more
infuriating.
stats. Just a couple more stats. 57% of voters on Tuesday were female. That was up from 2 points in 2016. A majority of voters were college graduates, 53%. Liberal or somewhat liberal, self-described, 60%. Their three big issues were health care, climate change, and income inequality. A big majority supported single payer, 61%.
That's like the get rid of private insurance, like full on single payer, right? The way they worded that, I think, was pretty.
Yeah, but I mean, they
eliminate private insurance.
How do you justify supporting two candidates out of that 61%?
This is why I think it's useful for them to say why they wouldn't support Bernie when he wins all the votes.
And also why Pete lying about it might be having more of a positive effect on a broader range of voters than we think.
I wonder. I mean, has Klobuchar? I mean, maybe she didn't get any of those people. I would like to see those crosstabs on there. But what's interesting is that when you hear those, right? They're and I think 40% of the electorate, if I remember correctly from the stat I saw, was incomes over 100%, and 100,000. I think it was something like 30. was 50,000 to 100,000, and 30% were under 50,000. So your PMCs, is that what they are?
Professional managerial class?
Yeah, the PMCs apparently there's more of them than those other. I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to divvy up those things. In New Hampshire, PMCs are pretty important apparently to woo. I mean, it's surprising because when you hear those numbers, right? 57% were women. 53% college graduates, 60% liberal or somewhat liberal, healthcare, climate change, income inequality, single payer. They sound, those 100,000 plus at 40% sound like Warren voters, right? I mean, theoretically, but not last night. The percentage of young voters declined from 2016 to 2020 from 19% in 2016 to 14%.
Is that's a turnout thing, or what do you think's going on there?
I don't know. I mean, look, in 2016, it could be that there were just more older people just as a percentage, because you add, I don't know the actual raw numbers of whether, but that 5 percentage points seems high. And at the very least, younger people did not come out despite the strokes.
Oh, God. I read a really horrifying stat that made me feel so old about the strokes. Like, Julian Casablancas is the same age now that Stevie Nicks was in, what year? 1994, when Clinton used the Fleetwood Mac song as his campaign song.
Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow.
I was like, God damn it. This is about as dated as that was when I was a kid, and it seemed ancient.
That's depressing.
Part of it could be just, what we saw with Sanders last time. A lot of it was a tremendous amount of Hillary Clinton disdain. We will get a better sense of that going forward, which the only thing I can tell you is encouraging in terms of what it means for the general election. Because if we start to get the sense now, New Hampshire is got a lot of independents. And the same day registration voting, a lot of crossover voters, as they say. But so we need to see this as it drags out. But there's a sort of a paradox here. People are saying, well, Sanders doesn't have the same support. This shows that he would be weak in a general election. But what it's also showing is that Clinton was uniquely weak in a general election against a also uniquely weak candidate, Donald Trump. So, I mean, it's quite conceivable, again, that anybody would beat Donald Trump. That is, that I go back to my refrain, Martin O'Malley could have won. Would have won. And, I think
he might have been able to mess it up.
Joe
Biden would have won.
Who knows? I mean, I think there's indication that the desire for people to go out and vote against Hillary Clinton quite high. The other thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that Bernie Sanders in 2020 is not necessarily Bernie Sanders in 2016. He has had a heart attack. He is 4 years older. Those 4 years are a pretty long 4 years. When do you get to be that age? You look at a guy like Biden whose decline was precipitous over the past 4 years. So that could have a lot to do with it, too. So there's a lot of factors.
He needs a healthy young running mate like Nina Turner.
He needs to do the stuff that I think also Namiki and I were talking about, which is just recalibrating also and making sure you're hitting the rural, hitting the older, getting some vets up there, getting some small business owners up there.
I gotta say, trying to canvass in rural areas in the wintertime, I see why maybe people don't do it enough. It's really hard. There's a lot of ice out there.
Yeah, it was snowy up there.
A lot of people want you to stay off their property.
Particularly up there.
It's live PMC or die up there.
All right, so let's just touch on this other sort of massive story that I think is brewing that, probably happened on that primary day for a reason. So there were career prosecutors who were handling the case against Roger Stone and U.S. Attorney's Office. They were charging Roger Stone with lying to Congress, obstruction of justice. And they had recommended, based upon what I understand, it was a recommendation by, I guess, a parole board, 7 to 9 years prison. Now, that's a lot, but I also, my understanding is that it's indicative of them feeling that he has some very important information about the president that they want to put a squeeze on him to get him to talk about. Donald Trump tweeted out, "This is a horrible and very unfair situation. The real crimes were on the other side." As nothing happens to them. Cannot allow this miscarriage of justice. Hours after that tweet, Bill Barr reversed the recommendation, or announced that they would reverse the recommendation, change the recommendation. One by one, 4 of the top career prosecutors on this team, 2 of whom had worked in Robert Mueller's investigation, filed notices with the court. They did this one by one, so they clearly sort of coordinated this to leave the case. One of them actually quit the DOJ entirely. They would not give a reason. It was clearly a protest. Jonathan Kravis was one of the prosecutors, wrote in a court filing that he had resigned as U.S. Assistant U.S. Attorney, leaving the government altogether. 3 others, Aaron Zielinski, Adam Jed, and Michael Mirando, filed notices with the judge saying, please notice the withdrawal from the case. Zielinski was one of the people who were on Robert Mueller's team, also indicating in filing he was quitting his special assignment to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the district, but he will remain an assistant at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Baltimore. Meanwhile, Donald Trump also withdrew the nomination of a former U.S. attorney, Jesse Liu, to serve as the Treasury Department Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes, right? They track terrorist money. And supposedly she was pulled because a conservative advisor to Trump, Levin, I don't know if she was married to that same Levin from back in the neocon days, was upset because Liu had a role in the sentencing of Flynn. And they were unhappy with the pressure that was on Michael Flynn. So basically what we're watching is a complete corruption of the Department of Justice. A complete corruption. And incidentally, Levin was noted in the Mueller report as providing updates to Flynn. She supposedly also claimed to have obtained a trove of emails from the dark web that were supposedly the 30,000 missing Clinton emails. So she was knee deep in this. So there's a lot of really strange stuff that's going down. My understanding is that the House is waiting for people to call in and ask for hearings on this. There should be hearings. If these were the Republicans, there'd be hearings about Bill Barr like 30 seconds after that announcement. They should have already been impeaching him. So call your congresspeople, call your senators, but particularly call your congresspeople and say, I want hearings on what Bill Barr just did. That's all you need to say. It's messed up. It's really messed up. Bill Barr is a very dangerous man. Very dangerous. I'm frankly a little bit shocked we don't hear more about it, but there's a certain amount of fatigue, I think, and lack of understanding of just how sort of nuts this is. We're going to take a break. We're going to head into the fun half. We have some more clips about Michael Bloomberg and obviously Donald Trump and what's it? Oh yeah. Let's show you. This is Trump responding to the Roger Stone recommendations, and they're pulling. Which clip number is this? Okay, yeah, here it is.
I thought it was ridiculous that if that's no, I didn't speak to the justice. I'd be able to do it if I wanted. I have the absolute right to do it. I stay out of things to a degree that people wouldn't believe, but I didn't speak to him. I thought the recommendation was ridiculous. I thought the whole prosecution was ridiculous. And I look at others that haven't been prosecuted, or I don't know where it is now. But when you see that, I thought it was an insult to our country, and it shouldn't happen. And we'll see what goes on there. But that was a horrible aberration. These are the same Mueller people that put everybody through hell, and I think it's a disgrace. No, I have not been involved with it at all.
In other words, he's been totally involved in it, and him putting out that tweet he knew was going to signal to his people. Right? I mean, he doesn't have to like back channel this. He does it in public. That's the way he does it. And then they know what is expected of them.
It's kind of smart in a dumb way.
Yeah, it's almost like criminally smart. It's almost like he's got a good criminal mind.
A certain low cunning.
Yeah.
What?
Folks, a reminder, this program relies on
I stay out of crime like you wouldn't believe.
I didn't say a word. I could have. That's his trick.
It's called tactics.
That's his trick, too. He always says, like, I didn't do this, but in the event that it's proven that I did do it, I could do it. And, I mean, that's the whole thing with the entire impeachment argument, too, right? Like, I didn't do it, but I could have. Even if I did, it was fine. That was actually what a lot of the Republican senators claimed was why they exonerated him.
He learned.
So why are you saying you didn't do it?
He learned his lesson.
Could have done it.
He could have done it, but he didn't. And
Folks,
now he learned.
I believe that the president has learned.
Folks, you should know that you could become a member of the Majority Report. You didn't, but you could if you wanted to. Go to jointhemajority.report.com. You go there and become a member. You will get extra content every day. You will support the free show. You will get the free show without commercials. Many, many benefits to becoming a member and just feeling like you're one of the members. Also, amquickie.com. We had a 10% bump in listenership over the past 3 weeks. Undoubtedly a function of our new tweaks. People are loving the show. It's out every day before 8 a.m. amquickie.com. You can sign up there or wherever you find your podcasts, completely free. And you can also listen to it on the app. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. We had Noma Key Const on the show last night, and she has a new show, The Nomiki Show, and you can find that at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show, Nomiki show. Michael, speaking of shows, tonight is not Tuesday, but it is.
But TMBS is here.
Tuesday.
Not a moment too soon with Crystal Ball and Malika Jabali. I will just say real quick, next week while we're on vacation, we will have new interviews with Adolph Reed Jr. Aaron Bastani will be making his first appearance on the show.
Cool.
And a bunch of other content. Last Sunday, the episode with Paul O'Connell, who's a law professor and labor organizer, on finally learning the lessons of Brexit in the UK, I think has a lot of strategic lessons for the left internationally. And, of course, we'll be talking about Sinn Féin doing very well in Ireland. All that and more. Get your tickets. There's a link in Majority Report blog post for April 3rd at the North Door in Austin, Texas. TMBS Live with Abby Martin and Anna Kasparian. TMBS, patreon.com/TMBS to get the whole thing.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we have an episode of Prolit Cult, AP Andy's side project about space, sci-fi, the paranormal, and the parapolitical, in which he speaks with Joseph Flatley, the investigative journalist behind the So-Called Prophet from Pittsburgh podcast. They talk about all kinds of cool, interesting UFO things, including a small UFO apocalypse cult in the desert of Tucson, started by a man named Gabriel of Arantia. And it's crazy, folks. Check it out. Patreon.com/TheAntifada. Also, last week, we had a very good episode, if I do say so myself, on political economy. Sean goes deep. So if you want to understand why capitalism is going to end, weighted down by the weight of its own internal contradictions, listen to that episode. It's really good. Patreon.com/TheAntifada.
Matt.
Literary hangover. I did The History of Colonel Nathaniel Bacon's Rebellion by Ebenezer Cook, a 1728 poem about Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion. We talk about, among other things, how George Washington's great-grandfather committed a war crime only a couple years after arriving in the States.
See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.